All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining us this morning, thank you. This is a look at the Wood TV Live Desk. My name is Luke Laster. Joined this morning with Dr. Fred Johnson III on some post-inauguration talk. Dr. Johnson, how are you this morning?
Fine, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate your time. Hey, if you could just take a quick moment to kind of introduce yourself and, as I saw over on Hope's website, you have quite the resume. If you could just kind of introduce yourself widely here real quick.
Sure. My name is Fred Johnson. I teach history at Hope College. I've been there 20 years as of last August. Prior to Hope College, I was the United States Marine Corps officer, communication electronics. I've also worked at General Motors and for an aerospace company, Goodyear Aerospace, before coming to Hope, and been blessed to get a number of awards. The most recent one was in November 2019, when the Daughters of the American Revolution gave me the Medal of Honor, their highest award. So it's good to be with you all.
Alrighty, so let's talk, some inauguration. Yesterday, a very different ceremony than what we're used to. What were some big takeaways from you?
I think that one of the biggest takeaway, and a lot of the people in the news have been talking about this, is just an overwhelming sense of relief that we finally have an incoming administration that takes seriously the threat of the pandemic, that plans are being put in place, that the Congress has gone through this traumatic insurrection last week, and that people recognize the gravity of what happened. But the inauguration also signified, from me, I guess, particularly as a Civil War historian, it signified to me the continuation of American Republican democracy. I often tell my students that in 1864, during the election of 1864, Abraham Lincoln, being a president of a country that was literally in a state of civil war, could have called martial law, but he didn't. He let the election go forward anyway. So there's something very, very inspiring about the fact that even with all that we're dealing with, even with all that happened on 1/6, the process of American democracy and certifying those votes of the Electoral College went forward. And we saw this age-old, this time-honored event of inauguration still taking place. So there are many good things to take away from, but I think it was just a continuity of what happened.
We didn't see President Trump in attendance. We saw former Vice President Mike Pence there. One thing that caught my eye yesterday as the day went on was hearing the news that President Trump did leave a note for President Biden. And one thing that also caught my eye, I believe it was later in the evening when he was asked when he was, signing some things there, and we'll get into that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But he said that he said the note was actually really nice. And might just be me as a journalist, but I'm itching to kind of hear what that says. He says he has to talk to President Trump first, but what is next there for their relationship? Obviously there's not much relationship there, but in terms of, I guess, just the future where we see a little bit of unity there between former presidents, what is next for, Biden and Trump?
A lot of that depends upon the ex-president. You look at a president like Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had a very, very turbulent 4 years in office. The Iran hostage crisis. He's coming in after Vietnam. The country was another period in our history where a lot of things were pressing on us socially. But after his presidency, Jimmy Carter has become just as much beloved figure. So, and people have reevaluated his presidency, I think, a lot based on what he's done after his presidency. So the relationship that will move forward from here will depend very much upon the ex-president, because the current occupant of the White House, Joe Biden, is very much focused on getting this pandemic under control and healing the divides in our nation. So all relationships are, to use a cliche, a two-way street. President Biden has said that he wants to heal the nation and bring about a sense of unity and an actual sense of unity. That can only happen if the former president is of a like mind.
And we've heard a little bit about what Trump might be doing next, the possibility of a TV network, things along those lines. We've heard that actually long before
Right.
he ran for office. But I want to kind of talk about censorship a little bit and kind of get your take on that. Obviously, Twitter and Facebook, etc., private businesses. But is that the right move to serve that permanent suspension on those kind of platforms? that have such
You
a
know,
huge following?
that's a very good question, Luke. And let me just, I've been thinking about this issue quite a bit, and because people have done in American history have done some pretty egregious things, and then hidden behind the First Amendment, the free speech part. And free speech should be honored, it should be enforced, it should be recognized, and it should be kept intact. But just like people like to say that, you know, that freedom isn't free, so also is free speech. We have it, it's a cherished right, we should exercise it, it should be protected. But there also comes, just like there's a price for freedom, free speech also comes with a price as well. No, we've been told that you can't yell fire in a movie theater. You can do it and claim it's free speech, but then there's a price to pay for that. And when you yell fire in a nation that was already torn apart by so much racial strife, and then under the pressure of a pandemic, and so many people, 400,000 Americans, and and certain vehicles were being used to widen those gaps instead of bringing them together. Well, there's a price to be paid for that. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so the lawyers can take it up and argue about whether or not Facebook being a private company and Twitter being a private company. But when you're talking about a nation that's trying to find its way through a crisis, I think back to World War II. People could have also claimed free speech for support of the Nazis. Well, they could have done that, but there would have been a price to pay. So likewise, in a time of national crisis, there are times when simply it's more appropriate to say some things. And if you have a vehicle that is allowing people or creating a situation that is causing harm to the nation, then you should expect that even if you have your free speech maintained, there may be a price to pay for that.
And moving forward now a little bit to Joe Biden now. Yesterday, first day in office, those executive orders that were signed, there was, a sweeping immigration plan. The mask mandate was a big one. What of those orders that were signed, as it got a lot of press yesterday, that's day one. What of those stuck out to you the most?
Any of the executive orders dealing with the pandemic. The pandemic has just been so devastating for our economy, for education. I've been listening to healthcare officials talking about the coming mental health crisis that'll be a wave of its own after this is all over. And people are just exhausted with it. And this thing has touched so many areas of life for us. So I think the thing that stuck out the most for me were the executive orders he signed dealing with the pandemic. And of course, what also stuck out for me was the fact that while he was signing those executive orders, he was wearing a mask. I think that is very important. People, I think the last 4 years have shown us, for those who've cared to pay attention, that words matter. When leaders speak, people pay attention a lot more than they may even realize. Words matter. And also what leaders do matter. They are the ones that are projecting the symbol or the posture for setting the model in what we should be doing, what we hope we should be doing. And the fact that he was wearing a mask said a lot, because, imagine how crazy it was that wearing a mask became politicized when clearly it's a public health crisis. And I went back and looked at the 1918 pandemic with the Spanish flu, and there were different states around the country where they actually had governors mandating mask wearing. Didn't happen this time. So him doing that sent a signal. I would say that the other executive orders that caught my attention were the ones having to do with immigration, and particularly with regard to the separation of families. I think of all the things that's happened in the last 4 years, and there have been many things that have upset me, but the one that's been most disturbing is separating of families or children from their parents in for-profit detention centers.
Before we move on, I want to hit on some of the specific, courses that you teach there at Hope. But for some of the viewers that have just kind of flowed in a little bit, we're getting a couple questions asking about your pin. You explained it, a little bit off the top of the broadcast there. Can you explain, the pin there on your lapel?
Sure. The pin is the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. It's a symbol of the United States Marine Corps. The Marine Corps prides itself on being a military force that fights on the air, land, and sea. So that's what that stands for. There's a globe, an anchor, and an eagle for air, land, and sea.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that real quick. We just
Sure.
had a couple questions come in on that one. In your specialized areas, per Hope's website, one of the courses you teach is slavery and race in America. What
Yes.
does now President Biden provide as Commander in Chief for race relations in the U.S. versus a Trump administration?
Well, the first thing that I can say about President Biden is that by selecting Kamala Harris as his vice president, he has merged several areas of our cultural reality. She's a woman. She is South Asian. She is African American. She's extremely talented. Obviously, she is. And his cabinet is starting to look like more like what America is, not what America is becoming, but what America is already. And the one thing that is struck me as being quite different early in this administration's life, just a few hours now, is the fact that he is not using the issue of race to divide. He already understands that we've had a tortured history in America when it comes to race and racial strife. Now, most of the people that I met a lot of good, conservatives in West Michigan, and they're not all racist. And so it's unfair to paint them as such. But when you use divisive language, it can make people think that. And so most of the people that I met in my life are good people that want to heal the racial divide. So what he's doing is he's speaking language that brings people together instead of using it as a firebomb to stir people up. And let's face it, there will always be people out there who will have incline an ear toward that. I told some personal friends that the first time that I heard some of the speech of the 45th president, his name was George Wallace. If you think about it, in American history, there have always been people like this. Before George Wallace, there was John C. Calhoun, the spokesman for the South, who was the lead secessionist just before the Civil War. After him, there was Andrew Johnson. After him, there was Orville Faubus, then Theodore Bilbo, then George Wallace. And there's always going to be somebody else who's using race as a dividing point. And we have struggled with this in this country. And undoubtedly, we will continue struggling with it. But it's nice to have a president who understands that this is part of our great national struggle, our mission. And we can do this. But we first have to have somebody who's articulating the fact that we can do it and confronting it head on. And that's what I see the current president doing. I really applaud him for his efforts.
Another list or another course listed there on the website that you teach is U.S. Military history. As a veteran, a professor, historian, what are our armed forces getting with the Biden administration again versus a Trump administration?
Well, Luke, you undoubtedly heard about the Russians putting bounties on our troops in Afghanistan. President Biden understands that the first duty of a commander-in-chief is to do no harm, to protect the troops. Now, as a Marine Corps officer, I understood that my first requirement was to take care of my troops and to never ask them to do something that I either couldn't or wouldn't want to do myself. I don't think that this president is going to ask our troops to do something that if he were in the position to do so, that he couldn't or wouldn't want to do himself. But more than that, as commander-in-chief, he understands that there's a reason why we have a civilian commander-in-chief as opposed to a military leader in the country. The founding fathers put that check in there as just yet one more protection so that we don't end up with a military dictatorship or some type of tyrannical situation. And as commander-in-chief, the other thing that's different about President Biden is that he actually knows the Constitution, respects the Constitution, and will stay within the guardrails of the Constitution, and understands that just because you have a big military doesn't mean that it's the first. What are they saying? What the saying is, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Our military is a hammer. There are many situations around the world that need fixing, but may not require a military solution. He understands that. I think that he will use our military judiciously, value the lives of our troops, bring them home as fast as he can, and really, really take care to be a commander-in-chief that obeys the Constitution.
You know, we saw action on day one, as we saw with coverage all day yesterday. First 100 days, or 99 at this point, you know, what else would you like to see?
I would like to see legislation passed for infrastructure around the country, roads, bridges, railroads. I would like to see he's already working on, having the federal government get on the cutting edge of the vaccine distribution. I would like to see a lot of action relative to fair housing. We are expecting to have a housing crisis after this is over with the rental moratorium when that finally goes away. So many families are already distressed before the pandemic began. This has added more stress to them. And when those protections finally go away, I can't even begin to imagine how many people are going to be looking for housing. It was already bad beforehand. I happen to sit on the board for Habitat for Humanity, Kent County, and of course that's a wonderful organization. And we have our hands full building houses and providing housing. But like so many other social challenges we have in front of us, there's always more of a need than there are people available to provide a solution. We have more than enough work in the vineyard to get busy with.
I like to always end on a good note. Before we do wrap up, anything else that you'd like to add?
Sure. I like to say that America is more than just a place, it's an idea. And we should be hopeful because a lot of things, despite all of what's been going on, there are a lot of hopeful things. We had 2 senators elected from Georgia that nobody expected to happen. We had an inauguration that went on. We have some senators and some people in the Congress who have been supporting the disinformation. They've backed away from that. There's a sense of cooperation. It sounds like things are settling down, that people have actually decided to re-embrace the fact that this is the United States of America, emphasis on the united. And I agree with the president. We just need to give ourselves a chance to be the united people we can be and listen to the better angels of our nature, to quote Abraham Lincoln. It can be done. I really believe in this country, and I believe that we'll do it.
Dr. Johnson, I really do appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, the viewers appreciate it. I can see some comments here pouring in, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much for taking this moment
Luke.
to chat. I'm going to ask you just to hold on the line for a second. I'm going to end this stream, and then I'll chat with you after that's wrapped up. So
Surely.
To those of you viewing right now, this has been a look at the Wood TV Live Desk. My name is Luke Lasser, again joined by Dr. Johnson of Hope College. Have a great morning, and we'll see you soon.